Hello, hello, and welcome to the show. I fucked that up. Okay, let me try that again.
It's a shabu.
It's my notes app.
Hit that thing like a bong. You're supposed to take it easy, man.
Just like Jake. Okay. All right. All right. I'm gonna try again. Hello, and welcome to the show. It's pretty simple. We are three friends who love TV shows. We pick a show to watch every month, and we get together here to talk about it. This is episode 49. We'll be covering the brand new 2022 HBO Max original series based on the memoir by Jake Adelstein. Things could be worse. You could be living in Missouri. Today on the show, Tokyo Vice. I'd like to welcome you inside the broadcast booth. I am Jay. I'm joined, as always, by my two Hall of Famers. We've got the Oyabun of the Show Kai, Aaron-san.
Yes, sir.
And we got the muscle of the operation, Tony-san.
Hajimemashite.
Arigatou gozaimasu. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we get into Tokyo Vice, let's take a trip over to the unofficial scoreboard. Aaron, anything to put on the unofficial scoreboard today?
Absolutely. Recently, me and Christy started watching in our lunchtime hour Avatar Last Airbender. She has never really watched a lot of animation. We watched Naruto together, and she was really digging that. And I had a feeling that she would really enjoy that. So we delved into that and watched it all the way through. Actually just finished it on Friday. Fantastic little series, great animation, fun story. Definitely, it holds up. It's worth a rewatch.
All right. How about you, Tony?
I'm still on that Elden Ring grind, but new shows. I think it's like worldwide popular, but there's a new anime called Spy X Family. I don't know if the X is pronounced like that, but it's pretty good. It's got the cutest little girl character ever. So if you're in the mood for kind of a funny little anime, it's been pretty good so far. I think it's 3 or 4 episodes in right now.
Cool.
I've heard of Hunter x Hunter, so I would assume that it's pronounced the same way because I've seen it. I think it's written out that way as well. Also, honorable mention. I don't know how it's going to land because obviously the ending matters, but Halo TV series is on Paramount Plus right now, and I'm really enjoying it. Don't believe the haterade. The show's actually quite entertaining.
I've seen a lot of haterade.
Lot of haterade. I'm sorry for peeking out the mics, but a lot of haterade. I have been playing Halo since it came out. I've played through Halo 1 innumerable times with friends and family throughout the years. And if they would have just carbon copied the video game into a TV show, it would have been awful. This is refreshing. It's interesting. It's at the same time nostalgic if you know the characters and know the story. So I think it's worth the check out. And they're finally getting to some of the action. So they're kind of following the Game of Thrones formula, a little splashy action at the beginning, a bunch of like character development and story development, and then we're getting back to the action as the show's kind of come into the second half.
So you said it's telling a different story from what we get in the video games?
So it's like the way they kind of explain it is like the video game, it's the blue team, that's the Master Chief's team. And in this universe, it's the silver team. So think kind of a remix, if you will, same story, but they made some creative choices to tell the story differently.
Okay. So it's like still same universe kind of thing?
It's not it is the same, the Covenant and the Master Chief and Cortana and Captain Keyes and Dr. Halsey and all the main characters from Halo, but like in this one, Commander, Captain Keyes and Halsey, are an item where that was not even a part of the video game story, right? So I don't want to reveal too much because there's a lot of stuff in it that's really good that I thought they did really well, but they go into like the language of the Covenant and like what the military would be doing to try and understand them more as an enemy. So I think that that's kind of some more immersive stuff that you wouldn't get in a video game.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
What about you, Jay? What have you got for the unofficial scoreboard?
I've got one show that has really surprised me and I've enjoyed quite a lot is a show on Fox called Welcome to Flatch. And it's just started, I think, in either January or February. It's a mockumentary sitcom about a fictional small town in Ohio, and it's very funny. It's very charming. But I think I can sell it in one sentence, which is Stifler plays a priest.
Okay.
And that's just been a whole bunch of fun. Something else that I watched recently was The Batman and
The Batman?
The Batman. So before I say anything, I was curious to hear if you guys had thoughts about this film.
Have not seen it.
Okay.
Tony?
I've seen it, but I guess when I changed apps, it stopped my recording. So I just discovered that little piece of information.
Whoa.
So might have to use Skype again, like we did in the past.
How far back?
I have no clue. I just went back to my little garage band and it was stopped.
All right. You know what? Just go ahead and start it up again, and we'll do a clap and keep going, and then I'll sort it out.
Okay. It started. I guess I just can't. I'll have to look at others. And switching apps apparently is not good for a garage band.
Thanks, Obama. Okay, so I'll count you down 3, 2, 1, clap, and we'll talk about the Batman. All right, so 3, 2, 1. All right, cool. So Tony, you were talking about the Batman?
Yes, I have seen it. I've seen it twice. I quite enjoyed it. I think. I guess what are your opinions on it since you brought it up?
I think it was neither good nor bad. It was kind of in the middle. I liked the way that they updated Gotham City to still be this menacing place, but have it not be too cartoonish. I thought they struck a nice balance there. I liked that it kind of along those similar lines, like the villains are not using ridiculous technology or magic to accomplish their aims. It's much more kind of realistic. Like that aspect of it. The story didn't really hold together for me, and it was about an hour too long. But could be worse.
Yeah, it was at least 30 minutes too long, and I agree. Like, I think this is the best Gotham City I've seen in a Batman. I think like it felt like Gotham City, not just like a large city that we call Gotham. Kind of like I would say that's probably like the Chris Nolan ones. It's like, what city is this? Just an American city that they call Gotham, but
Right.
this one actually felt like a city. And yeah, it's definitely like it's at least 30 minutes too long. But yeah, they could probably cut off maybe 45, give her some clues. But I liked Arpat as the Batman.
Yeah, I enjoyed him. I think I'd see, if they make another one, which I think everybody's contracted for a trilogy. So I'd see the second one.
Number 2 is confirmed, I think I saw on a headline. So we'll get one more.
Oh.
Colin Farrell killed it.
Yeah, he was great. That's true. The Batmobile was very stupid. I did not like the car chase at all.
What? You did it? That's like the best part of the movie for me.
It was like they've got Batman basically driving like a stock car hot rod. Like it didn't work for me.
Would you prefer like the old Adam West style Batmobile?
Well, the Adam West Batmobile was really just a convertible, wasn't it?
No, it looked a little weirder.
I guess so. I guess it had a paint
I'm
job.
positive that it was more ridiculous than you were remembering.
That's possible. Well, speaking of more ridiculous than I am remembering, let's talk about Tokyo Vice. 'Cause this
Hold
was
on.
one
I
hell
would
of a show.
like
I'm
to
sorry.
1 second. I
Yeah.
just would like to share this to the screen. I think that this is fair, not just a stereotypical car. You see that?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, been
Quite
validated.
redonkulous.
I mean, like, compare that against the Val Kilmer or the Michael Keaton Batmobile, and it's quite tame,
We're not disputing that there are other ridiculous iterations in and of themselves, but to say it was just a convertible.
True. That does not do the Adam West Batmobile justice.
Adam West is one of my favorite iterations of Batman. It's ridiculous. It's fun. It's not taking itself seriously at all.
Absolutely. Like the one that sticks in my head, I think, was like a made-for-television movie where I think the Penguin was gonna remove all the moisture from all the members of the United Nations.
Yep, I think that's just like in the show. It's like one of the episodes, but I remember that episode because it's the same one where like he gets the shark on his leg and he busts out the shark repellent spray and it just happens to have.
Yeah. We should get back to that. Like that kind of Batman.
That level of wacky zany Batman.
Yeah, and like if you're gonna do it that way and commit to it, then yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, from one crime fighter to one who's chasing and trying to discover why the crime is happening, Tokyo Vice.
Much better segue. So Tony, this was a you pick. So tell us about Tokyo Vice.
All right, Tokyo Vice. I'll paraphrase some Wikipedia, but it's 1999 and we're in Tokyo. Main character is Jake Adelstein, an American journalist who I think he's the first gaijin or foreign-born or outsider to get hired by a major Japanese newspaper, and we kind of follow his chronicles of getting in with the police. He's a crime reporter, and he gets kind of caught up with the Yakuza in a big way, and that's what the show outlines. Ansel Elgort, I think, hopefully I pronounced that correct, is Jake Adelstein. The reporter, he's from Missouri. He's got a sick sister at home. His family life he doesn't talk to his family very much. The great Kin Watanabe is Detective Katagiri. He's like I guess he's in homicide, but he's like in organized crime. He's caught up with the Yakuza as well. Rachel Keller, I don't know her very well, but she plays Samantha, who is probably one of the top 3 or 4 characters. She's a hostess at a club in Tokyo where they serve drinks and they get commission off of that. And she wants to open up her own club. She gets caught up with Sato, who is a Yakuza enforcer. We follow him. He's probably another one of the main top 3 or 4 characters. Spoiler alert for the favorite character rating. He's definitely mine. Rinko Kikuchi is Emi Maruyama. She's Jake's senpai, his boss at work, or his direct supervisor, basically. Not his boss, but I'm sure she's in a lot of movies. I really like her, but the one I think of is Pacific Rim that I've seen her in. She's kind of supporting actress in that movie, but I really liked her as well. It's kind of the main cast, but then a summary there. We can hop off from there.
So yeah, this show started off powerfully interesting and caught my attention very quickly. The immersion into the Japanese culture from an American's perspective was very interesting, and like each episode, I just wanted to know more. Me and Christy watched this one at like the day after release or like on release each week because we were like, we want to know what happened.
It held my attention really, really well. There were very few times that I found myself being distracted by my phone to go flip through Reddit or whatever. On the instances where I did reach for my phone, it was often because there was something in the show that jogged my memory and I wanted to look something up. This show really it created a lot of interest in me and definitely increased an already present interest in Japan and its culture.
I
Go ahead.
No, you both have been to Japan, correct?
Yes.
And
Correct.
I feel like when you came back from Japan one time, Jay, you told me about going to like a restaurant or a bar where they had like girls sit down with you. And so when they were showing the club, that's all I could think of. And I wanted to ask you about that. Like, is that the way that it was depicted in the show? Is that what you were talking about, or was it something different?
I think I might have been just describing that concept to you because I mean, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we actually went and participated. I don't think we ever went to a hostess club. It was just
Okay,
you know.
I misunderstood. But yeah, I remember you talking about it. And so, like, whenever it showed up in the show, I was like, oh, I've heard about this.
Now, my understanding of what the hostess club was different until I watched this show. Because what I had in mind was the girl would be dressed up like Hello Kitty, or like those do exist where like some of them are like medical themed and they're dressed up like nurses or maids or whatever. And some of these clubs, they're not even based around alcohol. Sometimes you just have tea with the girl. But this hostess club concept kind of fascinated me to see the inner workings of it, and we see a lot of the kind of social tensions that go into it.
Yeah, it definitely felt in a funny way. I was like, oh, America has this. It's called Hooters and Twin Peaks. It's just they're your waitress.
You're not wrong.
It's just very different. I guess. Sidebar into my thought. The Economist had an article that came up through my newsfeed. It was like, "Why are American men the loneliest?" And I was like, "Dude, you guys don't even know about Japan. Like I don't understand what you guys are talking about because like there are people over there marrying like holograms and shit." I felt like this was very much a part of that, like because your work life takes up so much of your social life, it's easier to go pay and spend money to be social with girls at a club than it is to actually go out and meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I saw it. Now, the inverse, how there were hostess clubs for hostess, which I didn't quite fully understand that concept with regards to Polina and Akira and their whole relationship. But like, was that like a men hostess club? Like it was the exact same thing, but like for men to hang out with you. So for
Yes.
ladies.
Yeah, it was just for women. I don't think it was for
Okay.
hostesses. Just women who
No,
wanted the same thing.
I went down a Wikipedia rabbit hole on this topic as I was watching the finale this morning. And according to the most reliable source in the world, Wikipedia, these host clubs actually maybe not specifically cater to hostesses, but according to what I read, one of the biggest clientele bases for the host clubs are hostesses who get off of their shift, just as we see in this show, get off of their shift at the hostess club and then go over to the host club and just spend all the money they just made to someone doing exactly what they just did. It's bizarre.
Wow, I'm very surprised.
That's what I'm saying. It felt like they were saying that it was a club for host, like for the hostesses to go to. But I maybe it's just gender host and hostess clubs.
Right.
And
Because there is one episode where we see the host out hustling on the street, just trying to get street people to come in. So I don't think that the host club is specifically just for hostesses, but I think that just happens to be one of their big client bases.
probably especially foreign.
Yeah,
Now,
and exactly what we see happen to Paulina in this show, where she racks up an enormous debt at the host club, cheered on by this guy who she believes to be her boyfriend, but is really just a sack of shit. These girls, they rack up a big debt with the club, and then in order to get paid back, the club then sex traffics these girls. Like that's 100% a real thing that was a problem. And apparently the Japanese government and the police had to crack down on these clubs and how they operated just a few years after what we see in this show.
Well, maybe it was because of the reporting by the Micho. Also, okay, just curious, how much were you guys aware of the underlying like cultural layers of Japanese culture with its intertwining with Yakuza and the police and everything when y'all were over there? Like, were y'all aware of kind of the dark, seedy underbelly of Tokyo?
We were in mostly touristy places, so I don't think we were really exposed. One area, was it in Roppongi Hills that there was like I think some Nigerians had moved in, or some sort of African nation had moved in, and they were trying to get us into the titty bar. Like, you want to go to titty bar? That's a horrible African accent, but that's mostly what we ran into there.
Well, the place where the neighborhood that we stayed in, as Tony mentioned, was called Roppongi, and it was at night a little bit of a seedy nightlife district. And our Airbnb host, who was a Japanese person, had told us verbatim. He told us, "Don't trust the Nigerians." And we asked for clarification on this, and he explained that the touts and the bouncers who stand outside the clubs trying to get gaijin like us to go into the strip clubs are just happen to primarily be big Nigerian guys. So he was saying, like if a guy is telling you we're going to give you free drinks or whatever, like don't believe them. That's a scam. But there was one night when we were in Tokyo where we met up with a friend of mine who was doing something similar to the JET program, where he was living over there and teaching English.
Okay.
We met up with him in Shinjuku, and we walked around Kabukicho, which is the neighborhood where Onyx, the hostess club in this show, is located. So we definitely were in the geographic location of where these Yakuza affiliated businesses operate, but I don't ever remember having any sense that there was something untoward going on, but I also didn't know what to look for.
Yeah, they wear suits now, so
Yeah.
it very much felt like the old world with a new world veneer. That's kind of how I saw the way they depicted Japan in this. Is that might equals right was still underlyingly like the underlying influence which ran the country, the city, whatever. But then there was the modern veneer of rule of law that kind of sat on top of it. So it's I know that the Yakuza kind of come into prominence in post World War II Japan and provide a lot of stability, which is why they've been able to, I think, stay as a part of the culture for so long.
Yeah, it's one of those situations similar to Pablo Escobar, where in some limited circumstances, these gangs that while they are criminals and violent, a lot of times they provide services for the community that the more legitimate organizations are lacking. Like for example, in the 2011 earthquake, when that nuclear reactor almost melted down.
Yeah,
Uh,
Fukushima.
Fukushima, yeah. Apparently, some of the first people on scene to start distributing relief to the people in the earthquake zone was not sent by the government. They were not sent by the UN. They were Yakuza.
I mean, it was pretty apparent that they were permeated throughout the culture in the town, right? Even like Ketagiri was like, you're taught to regulate the gangs and tolerate them rather than root them out.
And as Sato says, everybody pays.
Everybody pays.
Man, this show, like, as you mentioned, we'd been there a couple times actually, and it just gave me a huge nostalgia boner, like watching this show at the beginning. And I guess it wore off after a little bit, but I was just like, I don't claim to be an expert on what Japan is like, but you definitely hear about like gaijin. Like everyone was so friendly to us as tourists, but I think it's like that's kind of, at least what I read or hear, that's kind of like the extent of it. Like you're not really ever a part of the world there. Like even if you're an expat and you live there for a while, you're never actually like Japanese. I don't
Mhm.
think.
There are very few people who immigrate to Japan permanently. That it's almost zero. Like I think you basically have to marry a Japanese person, and even then, they might not let you in. Lindsay had a friend who worked for Nissan, and she could only work at the corporate headquarters something like 9 months out of the year, because more than that, then they would have to start that process of trying to get her there permanently, and there was just no point to that. So even like working for a Japanese corporation, they had to kind of cycle her in and out. So there's, as we see in this show, Japan is extremely insular in a way that they don't necessarily want you to really think about.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of unwritten rules of Japanese culture, right? There's a lot of I remember what was it Freakonomics?
Mhm.
You remember that? Where they do the analysis of the cheating in the sumo wrestling.
Yeah.
One of the things that they talk about in Japanese culture in that is, I cannot remember the words, but they said there are these two phrases that are really prominent in how people look at Japanese culture. And they translate to the way things appear and the way things are, right? And there's a huge emphasis in Japan on making sure that the way things appear is kind of the most important thing, right? You don't want to think about, they don't want to reveal how things are, but people know how they really are. I think that, Tozawa really kind of demonstrates this, right? Is
Mhm.
he's so concerned with the way things appear, his makeup on his face, making sure people don't know he's sick, not seeming weak, right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of the decision making and discussion is about how it'll appear, how people will take it. So I think that also even with the cops, right? Is it a murder? Not unless we say it's a murder, because then if we don't say it's a murder, we don't close it, then that's an open murder, and that appears bad, right? In America, we just leave them open for 30 years.
Mhm. Yeah, and with the cops either drinking or not drinking the tea, because that's going to send a signal about this and that. Like it's
Yep.
layers on layers.
Now,
I'm sorry.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say that something that fascinated me about this show was how the Yakuza operated out in the open in a way that you would not expect from organized crime elsewhere, where they just have a clubhouse and everybody knows where the clubhouse is, and they have pictures of the leaders on the wall. And in the clubhouse, they're all wearing the Chiharakai uniforms. Like when Tony Soprano and his guys get together, yeah, they have a clubhouse, but it's in the back of the strip club or it's out front of the deli. It doesn't have Tony Soprano's crime boss, headquarters up in lights on the door. You know what I mean?
I think it gets back to the tribalism within the Yakuza and how they are accepted. Like there's, like when yet Katagiri goes in and says, "I'm going to arrest three people because there were three bullets in the gun," right? And he goes into their office. It's surreal almost, right? Like they're somehow legitimate by having a business. But I guess I don't know. Like, are those Yakuza buildings or do they have a front? And we're just not shown the front. Does that make sense? Whereas
Okay, yeah.
when you see, because they refer to as office buildings,
Mhm.
like oh, that one guy jumped off the top of an office building. Well, we knew it was, was it Chikura? I can't ever say its name. What is the Yakuza division where Saito is from?
Chiharakai.
Chiharakai. Okay, so like they don't ever mention what is going on at that office building, but we know it as the Chiharakai, you know, home base clubhouse.
Mhm.
But like, what if they're doing something down at the front level to make it legitimate, and we're just not kind of in on that?
Okay, I see what you mean. But I also read that the one of the ways that the Yakuza maintain that veneer of legitimacy is that, at least in theory, they don't engage in crimes with, and I'm making finger quotes here, around the word crimes. Like, for example, they're not supposed to just steal from people because that is unhonorable, but to loan shark them and charge them exorbitant interests, well, that's different.
They agreed to it.
Mhm.
That is part of the charm, at least like in media and the show. Just like it's not an honor, it's more like, but it's kind of charming how big respect and like saving faces in the Yakuza. Like you make a mistake or you fail, you cut off your pinky finger as like a
This seems
like
dumb
a
to me.
sacrifice.
That seems dumb to me because wouldn't you want the guy like to have the extra pinky length to like hit the button or something? Like I don't know. Maybe back in the days of samurai, which I assume this is like inspired by, it makes sense to cut off your own limbs. But I don't know. Like to me, that feels demotivating in a big way. Like I would just not become Yakuza. I don't think I've got the guts for it. But um at the same time, like when the guy at the end was like carving his finger and they were like, you can't even do that right. Like I was like, there's just some people that are not made to be gangsters, I guess.
I'm going to agree with you that I also don't have the stomach to be Yakuza. However, I would love to have a place to hang out like the Yakuza clubhouse.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
just
a clubhouse would be fun. A
yeah,
clubhouse would
just
be fun.
place to go. There's some guys, we're all wearing the same shirts, playing some cards, having some laughs, maybe drink a beer or two, tell some
Foosball.
jokes. Yeah, that looked like a good ass time until the guy until the guy botched cutting off his own finger. That was different.
Yeah. Like if you had to go to the club and like every third time you were there, somebody's having to cut their finger off, how often do you want to come to that club? Like that's
True. I'd find a different club.
I do think that the other thing that like I think that was really important for them to show like the different levels of the Yakuza, and I thought the show did this really well. Kind of like Oyabon and his like lieutenants or however you want to look at them, but then even above them, there's like the council of Yakuza, and then there's like the regional leader, and there's like treaties among the different regions. But at the same time, they're kind of like planning against each other. Like that all stuff was really interesting. But they even took it down to the recruitment level when they showed Saito recruiting that kid and him going through kind of the same thing that was it his Enikai did for him or would have done for him. So I thought the show did that really well, kind of immersing you into the Yakuza culture, the Yakuza daily life, while at the same time taking it into the Yakuza internal politics.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all. There's so much about this show that I thought was phenomenal. But I want to reference a drawing you sent in our private chat channel about the horse drawn at the tail end was like phenomenally detailed, and then at the end it's like a 4-year-old was drawing. And I think that's a bit too extreme, but I do feel that the last episode, I it got to the end and I was like, you got to be shitting me. I was like, you're giving us an episode with not one, but like 6 cliffhangers. Yeah. Like you didn't, I did not feel like this is the one weakness that I think that this show suffers from. And I think the intent was to try and hook everybody and make everyone clamor for a second season since they weren't, automatically renewed for it yet. But I didn't feel that last episode offered a significant enough payout to warrant the 6 cliffhangers. What do you think?
Like, agree completely. It felt like a different, like the pacing was way off. I don't know. It felt like maybe like they had, I don't know, when was this show made? It had to have been like made during pandemic times with how long it takes to like produce a show and get everything done and everything. Like maybe they just were hit hard with budgets and they didn't know like how long it was going to go.
Principal photography began March 20th, and then it was halted on March 17th due to COVID. Then they resumed November 26th, 2020, and finished June 8th.
Like 10 or more, like 10 or 12 episodes, and then they're like, all right, we ran out of time or budget. Let's like this episode 8, we're going to have to make it a makeshift. I don't know. It was off, like y'all said.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like
I took. Sorry, go ahead.
This is a lazy take, but when I got down to the end of this show, it felt like this show was like both too long and too short, where it felt like this show began life as a limited series. We're going to have an 8-episode run, tie everything up. And then around episode 6, they were like, hey, what if we try and get a season 2 and just kind of fuck around for 2 more episodes? I was like, what the fuck? But on the other hand, there's like 4 different shows inside of this show that I would watch the hell out of. Like Aaron, you were just talking about the intricacies of the Yakuza and the relationships between them and the growing war with Tozawa. If that was just the show, I'd watch that show. I'd love that show. If the show was just Sato and Samantha, I would be a little bit less interested in that show, but I would still watch that show. If the show was just about Paulina was great. I'd watch that show. But what they did in these last couple of episodes just kind of, I wouldn't say ruined the show, but it crashed the plane. You know, we were flying all right, and then it just down.
They built up so many like interesting, like they were slowly but surely laying the blocks for like some interesting like conflicts later down the road. You know, it's just like Jake, his relationships and stuff. You're like, okay, it's gonna have to come to a head sometime, which I guess it kind of did. And then like Samantha Sato, like the club and the conflicts there between everybody pays, like he's gonna have to enforce on her, you know. And
hot take, Joe think
like,
he survives?
He's gonna survive because he's got to be like a fan favorite. And then they stabbed him in the stomach instead of the chest. So.
But fan favorite doesn't matter if it's a memoir, right?
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like that's the one thing I kind of where I guess to me I wasn't so upset about the different storylines that they were working on is that it was based off memoirs, right? It is based off a true story. So the fact that Tozawa is dying of what I assume is like liver failure from over drinking alcohol and is flying away, I assume he's going to get a liver transplant. And that meeting that we saw foreshadowed is going to be the season finale of season 2 or something like that, if they can get it. Now, I personally think that's poor choice to do a flashback into a second season unless you have that already kind of locked down.
Yeah.
But it left me looking for that scene, and I think you guys too, at the end. And as we got down to the last 5 minutes, and I was like, okay, he's getting on an airplane. This clearly isn't happening. What's going on? Is there another episode? I actually went and looked, and I was like, did I misread that there were only 8 episodes in this season? Because it did not feel like a finale. And the only other show I can think of, and maybe y'all haven't seen it, is I think like season 2 of The Expanse ends right before the giant crescendo that it's been building to all season. And it's like the giant crescendo is in like the 4th episode of season 3. And it just feels so weird that that's the cadence of it, but it's because it got canceled by Sci-Fi and Amazon purchased it and took it up. But that's what it felt like. It felt exactly like you're saying, Tony, like they were planning like 10, 12 episodes. And then due to the pandemic and to COVID and budget cuts and everything, they got 8. And this is what we got.
I'm sure it's not cheap to be filming in Tokyo. If they weren't in Tokyo, I would be amazed because like they had to have been filming on site.
Now, I went back and immediately watched the opening scene from the first episode again after I finished the last episode. And I don't want to use the word ruin again, but I think it diminishes the end of Katagiri's story because I think the last thing that we see of Katagiri in this show is that Tozawa has just threatened to kill his family.
No, Jake showing up.
Oh, right? That's right. I'm sorry.
It's after that. He's already got his family out. I thought Jake was going to do a switcheroo and put Katagiri's family on a flight to like Missouri.
Oh, man. Ooh, I'm put a pin in the VHS tape because I want to come back to that. But
okay.
But the climax of this last episode is Tozawa threatening Katagiri's family. And the performance that Ken Watanabe gives in that scene, phenomenal. Just the dread and the sheer terror on his face of the thought of Tozawa killing his children was excellent. But then you go back and you watch the opening scene, and the opening scene is Tozawa's henchman telling Jake that if Jake doesn't, or if Jake publishes the story, then Tozawa will kill Jake's family. And Jake just sits there and is like, all right, man, light my cigarette for me while I think about it. And that's just not the show that I want to watch. I don't want to watch the exact same threat just completely disintegrate this hardened cop, while Jake over here, just cool as ice, is like, whatever, man. I don't want that.
The only thing I can say to like in response to that would be that we don't know what happens in the second season. Like, if that is the last sequence, the last kind of meetup that the whole Tokyo Vice story is leading to, we don't know what's gotten there. Like, maybe there's a reason why that thread is hollow now, or it doesn't carry any weight, right? Whereas this is Tozawa literally breaking protocol, right? He's breaking the unwritten kind of rule where you don't do crime, you don't do stuff like that. You kind of keep it in the secret, and the police kind of try and keep the peace, right? Here he comes out and says, I'm going to kill your family if you keep messing with me.
Right.
And so to me, I think that part of the sheer terror is that it's like whenever you're not expecting something and all of a sudden the dog starts talking to you. You know, like that would produce a certain level of existential fear because the rules of the world have just been broken. So I saw that more as kind of Katagiri thinking that things were one way with Miyamoto. He's also, realizing that he basically sent Miyamoto to his death. And that, I mean, that's they could have given us that resolution, right? They could have taken us all the way through that part of the story. But I don't know. I feel like the show has enough. I want to see a second season and see what happens, but I feel like the choices they made with that last episode, they left me so dissatisfied with the lack of payout that it dropped the score significantly in my mind.
Yeah.
Like I was riding high. We were going into like episode 8.
Yeah.
Real high.
They just left too many things open. Like that loan, the predatory loans profiting off suicides, just kind of, I mean, it ended, but it just kind of went up in a wisp of smoke. And then,
and chest hair.
I thought there would be some burned chest hair from the battery. I thought there would be some comeuppance. Like, I'm like, they have forensic evidence, like DNA sequencing, right, in Japan, like even in late 90s, to like tie Sato to the brutal murder in this guy's own house after he's been seen meeting Samantha. Like, I thought some sort of like the crime of murdering the person that was extorting Samantha, like I thought there would be some sort of comeuppance. I really liked that storyline. That was like, well, I didn't like it, but that was a very engaging storyline where she was going to have to like sacrifice all of her morals and like dignity to like keep what she wanted. I thought that was a really good like conflict. And it kind of just went away and then nothing ever came out about that. Like, I don't know, just felt like it. I loved all the stories it was building, which I keep forgetting that it's based on like memoirs. So that's kind of, I guess it's hard. You can't make up stuff too much.
Yeah, he's got 3 books that have been published. Tokyo Vice, American Reporter on the Police Beat in Japan, The Last Yakuza, Life in the Japanese Underworld, and apparently being relevant today, Pay the Devil in Bitcoin, the creation of cryptocurrency and how $500 million of it vanished in Japan.
Well, keep in mind that it's based on the memoir. It's inspired by his true story, but that doesn't mean that they can't take liberties. Like I'm certain that Samantha is either an amalgamation of a bunch of different people or just a just fiction. The his boss Emmy at the newspaper, she's definitely a combination of different bosses that Jake had through the year. But this, I think the fact that it is based on a real person and that real person was an executive producer on this show, I think also taints it, because there were a lot of points in this show where it wanted you to be like, yeah, Jake, you're the hero, man. You're out there fighting the good fight. And it never really earned that for me. Like sometimes it got preachy kind of out of nowhere about the importance of an independent press and the importance of even newspapers specifically, and the importance of building and preserving the truth. These are all things that are very important, and especially in 2022. But I don't really, it felt forced coming out of this show. You really felt the writer's voice there.
Oh, I didn't get that at all.
I felt like he gave himself some huge cojones. Like either he's the dumbest person ever, or he's just got like huge balls and no regard for his own safety. Like he like goes after the freaking Yakuza enemy boss's girl, like, and he
Yeah.
just keeps like casually chatting people up in the middle of public, like, nice watch, bro. Like there's no way that actually happened in real life.
Yeah, I could do without the whole trying to get with Tozawa's girlfriend storyline. Just get rid of that. That was dumb.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it just gets back to I don't know anything about their culture. I don't know anything about how this would play. So I wasn't there. To me, it just was whenever you find out that one of his girlfriends had gone missing, the police are covering kind of some of these types situations. Like, I think that there's also the whole culture shock from an American perspective and Japanese like culture. Like whenever he runs into all the different issues with the like editor not happy with how he's presenting things and him constantly having to rewrite it. To me, maybe they don't say it, but there is a huge emphasis on how they tell the story, how they present it, and it kind of comes into conflict immediately with how, as an American coming to Japan, he sees the purpose of press. Is it just to inform you as to what happened, or is it to find out what's happening that is not being said, right? So I don't know. I also think that the interesting they don't really go into this much, but how his boss is Korean or is like part Korean or something like that, like and how that plays into like the way she acts in public and at the meet show as well, because she is clearly keeping that a secret. So I don't know. I don't know any reason why it would not be true or why it would be false, because unless there was someone saying, "Hey, that didn't happen." At that point, I don't know. I wasn't there either way, but it didn't seem false to me, especially if you're living there for multiple years. You probably become much more comfortable approaching people, especially when you're fluent in the language.
I think there was also some obligatory 2022 references to how a society oppresses marginalized people. We see how the boss hides the fact that she's Korean. We see some racism directed at Jake and at Samantha. We have that interaction where Jake's colleague at the paper, the taller one who doesn't wear the glasses, he's, I think, implied to be gay, but they don't go anywhere with it. They just kind of hint that he's hiding something and he's in the alley with a dude, and then we never really come back to it.
I think that that's just a symptom of the season being cut short. I
Could
mean,
be.
I think that there's a lot of stuff that has not been wrapped up or used or touched on, but also it may just come back to like I don't know, like this is where I guess perspectivism, like if you're an American and it's a little bit more accepting to be gay. I mean, it's because they call it the gay 90s, right? And you see over in Japan someone who's like hiding that, and he makes a note of it. Maybe it does come into play later. I don't know. But at the same time, to me, I thought that the racism was pretty clearly a part of like it from the get go, since Jake is a white person and they like say, "Oh, we've never hired a white person or a foreigner to be on the meat show before." Like, isn't that kind of the whole premise of the story?
Right. And a detail that I think is not in the show, but the newspaper that he works for in the show is fictional. In real life, the newspaper that Jake Adelstein worked for is called the Yomiuri Shinbun, and it is a right-wing newspaper. It tends to be more politically conservative. So I think that kind of heightens the how important it is that, oh, like even this like right-wing one where the editor is a racist nationalist, even they're hiring a gaijin. I did like the line where one of the coworkers of the newspaper says, "Oh, he's a racist nationalist. You have those too, right?"
Yeah. To me, I guess I just assume in the 90s there's a lot more overt racism because there was here also. So I don't know. I guess I don't see everything in terms of 2020 like racial social warrior just because race is included, because race is a part of our history, as a part of the world history. It's part of like if you go back, there's discussion of race in the 1800s. So if we tell a story and someone mentions that there's a black person, is that 2020 social justice warrioring, or is that just reading Huckleberry Finn?
That's true. I think there is a conflation of discussions of racial issues with just immediately assuming that it's social justice warrant.
Yeah,
So that's fair.
I'm at this point now where every time like someone like just because race is a part of something doesn't mean that it's like, oh, well, we have to make sure we're social justice warriors. Like that's a part of the story sometimes, right? Like I don't know. I've been watching some older shows where it's a lot more overtly flagrant with some of the racial things that are said. And it's just like it's almost not even a second thought. It's like, oh, it's a joke, so you can get away with it. I think that whenever it's like when you make a big deal about the joke, that's more like 2020. Whenever it's just that there is a racial joke or there is a racial reference or there's something that has to do with race, I think that that's kind of the post like George Floyd like era like sensitivity like triggering almost, right? Because sometimes it is just there is some racist people in the story. I think it's funny how we all looked at Watchmen and in the post George Floyd eyes and like had a very different take on it than probably what it was like taken as the first time around. But even that one, right? They weren't that was kind of like pre all this stuff whenever it was really kind of getting started. So I think that it's more impactful after the fact of that. But this to me, race was a huge part of the story from the get go because he was white a white American in Japan, and like you guys said, you're not ever really accepted, right? Like that's just a truth of Japan.
Yeah, and when you're 6'3", everywhere you go, you're immediately identifiable, which is one of the great things about traveling with Tony, because Tony's very tall.
Yeah,
so if we ever get separated, I'm like, there he is.
I was gonna say, I was like, you can't really like follow people when you're the 6'3" white guy, right? Yeah. You can't be like, oh, that was a different 6'3" white guy following you, not me.
I was just like, I don't know. You can never tell actors and actresses how tall or short they are, but like Samantha seems petite to me. So it was hilarious, like watching her drive Jake on her motorcycle. I was like, how can she even balance with this big old dude behind her?
Now, I'm glad that you brought up Watchmen, because something that Aaron, something you said during our Watchmen episode stuck in my mind watching this show, which was that I wanted more moral ambiguity out of this show. Because once I started to think about it and break it down, the good and the bad in this show, it's really simplistic if you think about it, because we only ever deal with two Yakuza gangs. One is held up to be the kind of virtuous one. The other one's obviously cartoonishly evil. We meet two cops. One is good, one is bad. We meet two superiors at the newspaper. One is good, one is bad. There's no room for you to make up your mind about anybody. I wanted, especially from the Yakuza, I wanted to see more of those, whatever it is positive that they do for the community. I wanted to see that, and I also wanted to see the negative that they choose. I wanted to see, what is it about Chihara Kai? Like they talk a big game about the old ways and being honorable, but what does that really mean? And maybe show me some instances where they break their own rules. I want to see that show, but here it was a little bit just kind of good, bad, simple.
Tony, why do you think that Chihara Kai were considered the good guys in the show?
I don't know. I guess it's just like that kind of. I don't know if it's a thing, but just like feel like Jay's done more research on the Yakuza, but it seems like they avoid drugs, kind of like you see like in The Godfather, they want to avoid like drugs and stuff, and then so it's kind of like, I guess at least in the show they're portrayed as more, like I said, not honorable, but they still operate in respect and kind of keep their crimes to more like extortion instead of like severe crimes like murder and drugs and stuff, whereas Tozawa is basically they just don't give a frick.
I felt that at least the way it was portrayed was that the police would rather deal with the devil you know than the devil you don't. And that, like you're saying, the Chihara Kai were not involved in some of the more negative crimes that really undermine the community, whether that be, loan sharking to the point of pushing people into suicide and then collecting insurance payments on their, deaths, or, smuggling in drugs, which cause, lots of problems within the community. So I think that that's kind of the pseudo moral argument, is that these gangsters stick with crimes that are more palatable and less harmful to the community, and therefore we'd rather deal with them than deal with someone who's going to bring drugs and violence and things like that into our community. So, I mean, that's kind of
like,
how I saw it.
It's like Jake says at one point, he's like, "What, you can like hire a girl to spank you in a diaper or something, but don't rock the boat." Like, don't rock the fucking boat or whatever he says. I forget what the quote is, but it kind of seems like the more traditional Yakuza, like there's a balance, at least in the world of the show, where it's like they're kind of in their own world, and the police don't really tolerate it, but they just like, as long as the streets are peaceful. I'm assuming before this there was maybe a lot more violent gang warfare. I think it's kind of alluded to by Katagiri-san, where he's like, we've had like 2 or 3 years of peace where it's just kind of like it's so much better now that they just want to keep it there. So like the old Chihara guy, sorry, I didn't look how the name was spelled. They're like trying to maintain that order, not rock the boat, where the Tozawa clan is, they're gonna rock it. And then I feel like the Japanese society in this show, like they tolerate the Yakuza only as long as none of that stuff's happening, like the extreme violence in the street, like murder, drugs. Like I think all the other Yakuza clans, they don't want those things, because then their little kind of like tolerance that the world gives them will slip away and they'll be the target. They'll have no support anymore. It's a vibe I got.
Oh, hey. So Samantha, she's actually been in a couple of shows that we've watched here on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize she was in Legion. And did we watch the second season of Fargo? I know I did.
We did not cover it for the show.
Okay.
I watched it. That was
Me too. Yeah.
That was great.
It was so good.
I couldn't remember who she was in that, but I remembered her from Legion because she was basically the romantic lead.
Yeah, I didn't. It didn't trigger for me that was who that was. So I just was looking up to see if I'd seen her or anything. I was like, oh, we have.
Samantha, her character in this show was a roller coaster for me. Like, I didn't start off liking her that much. I think I told Jay that, and he said she gets better, which she did get a lot better. And then by the end, I was like, it was so obvious that she was just, I don't know if she wanted to admit it to herself, but she was just using Sato as a way to solve the problems, is what it seemed like to me.
I
Like,
feel like she's using
she,
both of them.
yeah, she fooled herself, I think, maybe, but it was like so obvious as soon as she started hooking up with Sato that she wanted him so that he could solve her problems for her.
Well, and he figured that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost a lot of respect for her when she started going down that path, and it was hard to tell whether or not the show wanted you to think that the two of them were actually in love with each other, because if that's what they wanted you to think, they didn't do a good enough job. They didn't earn it.
I don't know. I feel like, and maybe it's just part of the rush, is that I felt she was genuine up until she started like, I've got this guy who's bothering me, baby. Like that whole line, like even like her acting in it felt fake. and,
I never felt like she loved Japan so much.
the only time was whenever she was having dinner with Jake and they were talking about like anime and manga. That's the only time I genuinely thought like, oh, this is like someone who's really into Japan. But nothing else that she talked about was ever Japanese culture. It was always business or drinks or what's happening at the club, right?
Oh, she's like, there's a huge world out there, and she even admits she's like, really the only consequence is that she won't be able to come back to Japan. Like, there are no other consequences for her. Essentially, she doesn't even have to go home, like the reporter guy says.
So the money in this show, and especially with Samantha, didn't make a lot of sense, because her stash of cash, is it like how much is it? Because it seems to be kind of squishy to fit whatever the story needs, where it's enough that she's able to secure a space for a club and renovate it. But when it comes down to pay the ransom in the last episode, it's only like $7,000. So
it was like 70,000, I think.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think that was what was left because she says I have to make the final payment.
Yeah, it was too squishy for me.
Sure.
I felt like we were supposed to find out what was going on with all that. Like Akira, the host dude, a-hole, like biggest a-hole in the show. Scumbag.
Yeah.
Like, how
I don't know, the guy that killed Paulina, probably the biggest asshole in the show. Oh, that was me.
Akira, as good as killed Paulina. He's the one who racked up her debt.
Yeah, but it's like, so he knew from Paulina, I guess, about the money. Like, I just don't know. I feel like that was a crime too far. Like, I understand like him racking up the debt and not really caring about her and stuff, but like that seems like a advanced crime. I thought we were gonna find out it was like set up by Sato's gang. They knew about the money. They knew about the club from Duke. He told them, and they set up they sent Paulina away to make her worry about her, so they could set up this whole scenario where they get the rest of her money and make her either unable to open the club to compete or have to turn to the Yakuza. I thought we were gonna have some sort of like big reveal that it was all a big setup, and that's what I wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm. But I agree that having Akira then just like fake the ransom and steal it, like that was one too far. Like, we already had good enough reason to hate this guy. That felt like unnecessary.
And Samantha's a smart character. Like, she thinks logically and she has a good head on her shoulders. Like, why is she showing up to a random area where these dudes that have kidnapped her friend are gonna come pick up cash money from her in the middle of nowhere? Like, she would not do that?
Yeah, it feels like
even if they had her, they would just beat the shit out of her and take her money. Like, I don't see how she could have foreseen any other outcome than that outcome.
Yeah, Samantha from episode 1 does not get herself into that situation. And I think that's one of the problems about these last couple episodes that we've been harping on, is that the characters start making decisions that don't make any sense. Like, for example, when Katagiri is going into the shady warehouse where he believes the drugs to be, but it turns out it's just Tozawa who's going to talk to him. Number one, he drives his very identifiable classic car to the stakeout, parks it right outside. I mean, it's like if I was the Bond villain and I'm going into my lair and I look over and there's a silver Aston Martin parked outside. I'm like, I know who's here, right?
Yep.
And then Katagiri, he just gets out of the car with his little snub-nosed pistol and is like, I'm just going to go walk around and see what I can find out. Like, I don't think a seasoned, organized crime detective would do that.
Especially
Especially
without
not one with
backup.
the family. Yeah, he's like he was going in to like save Miyamura. Is that the Miyamoto? Miyamoto's life or die trying. I was like, bro, you got like 2 little girls and a wife at home. Like, you can't go in with 6 bullets in your gun and pull this off. Like, I don't think he would do that either. I don't know. It was still good. I really did like the show.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that might be to the setting. Like, I just have like a love for Japan, I guess. At least traveling and visiting there. Probably wouldn't live there, but it was good.
Something I really enjoyed was the cars. Not only Katagiri's, his classic Z. I really
Z28?
liked seeing, yeah, I like seeing that. And you know that I looked it up, and that car went out of production in 1983. So even in 1999, like that was kind of a cool like classic car. So you know,
My
seeing some of
parents
these
had a
like
Datsun Z28 back in the day, they said.
oh yeah,
Yeah, way back in the day.
oh that's cool. I've always liked Z's.
Well, are we
Anybody
ready
else
for
think
some
that
ratings?
9/11 was going to happen in this show?
It's in
'Cause the show's-
1999.
It's all
So,
about
like,
99, and the flashback from the beginning said 2 years earlier. So I thought like we are going to catch up to 9/11 going down at the end of the season.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, I mean, but you got to remember that could be 2 years earlier in the summer.
Yeah.
I was in New York the August before 9/11. We walked right between the Twin Towers, like across New York. We didn't go there because we were out of time. Like, we didn't go look around there, but I just remember that was kind of crazy that we just happened to be in New York the summer before.
Yeah, it's kind of eerie because that must have been just like a matter of weeks, right?
Yeah, because school had started. You know, we were back, and we had gone like at I believe, the beginning of August. So
Well, favorite character voting?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm gonna go with Jake just because I find his kind of like Americanized perspective thrown into Japan really interesting. I also thought it was really funny, like whenever I don't know, I felt like there was like a weird kind of synergy with how like today there's a lot of like Japanese and Korean pop bands that are getting popular over here. Like thinking back to like how big NSYNC and Backstreet Boys were in the 90s, you know, and like being worldwide phenomenons and them seeing it, how it would have been kind of a strange little like taste of home if you're over in Japan and someone's singing it. But that whole interaction between them was really, really good. It made me like Saito a lot more. So Saito's a close second in my book.
Yeah, I like like Jay was mentioning other shows he'd watch. Like I would watch a bromance show between Jake and Sato. It'd be a pretty good show, just like a crime reporter being buddies with
roommates with the
like
Yakuza.
Yakuza. Or just like the conflicts are like when he has to tell about the stories and when he doesn't and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. Interesting premise.
I got it. Don't write about it.
But this show begs the question: the lyrics to "I Want It That Way." What do they mean?
There's a whole article, an interview with the Backstreet Boys on how the lyrics to that song make no sense.
Oh, unfortunate.
The joke's anal, right? Is that get the joke correctly?
That was what they were inferring in the
Yeah.
show. That is what the Japanese people took that song to mean.
Yeah.
Like, obviously.
The two other reporters, whenever they showed up, I enjoyed them. I wouldn't say, anywhere near favorite characters, but I did enjoy them because they often broke the tension and allowed us to have a little bit more of the kind of the more fun side of fish out of water American living in Tokyo.
Sure.
But I think at the end of the day, the most interesting character to me was Sato.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that dude. I liked Emmy a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
I just like definitely got that vibe. Like we hung out with some people, and I mean it hasn't been that long since we've been there, but I still got that vibe where it was. I feel like men still have a ton of power there. Was the vibe
Oh,
that
yeah.
I got. So I just really related to her getting basically treated like a second class, like reporters slash. Like she had to serve all the drinks, and she does like the best reporter work, but she gets pushed to the second to last page and stuff. It's like really felt for her.
It's almost like if people hadn't been fighting for half a century over here to change the status quo, it'd be the same.
Well, shall we get some ratings in?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Tony, this was a Tony pick. I'll let you lead off.
It's hailing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we're almost done. Okay. All right. Sorry. It's
Tony's
You're good?
experiencing some weather difficulties.
I left my car out because it was just gonna rain. It was like,
Oh, no.
free car wash. I'll have to put my car in here pretty quick. As we said before, it did not stick the landing. Before the ending, probably high 8, but I'm gonna drop it down to like a 7. I was trying to think of 7 what's. 7 sliced pinky fingers. Out of 10.
How about you, Aaron?
I was entering into the end like at a 8.5, 9. Like I was really excited to see how that was going to kind of all tie together. And like Tony said, like you said, the hay did not stick the landing. It was very much just cut off, and I felt lacking. So it dropped it significantly. I think a 7 is a fair score. The show is good. The show has got some good aspects, good acting, good stories, interesting characters. But this is a season like 3/4 of a season, and without that payoff at the end, this really goes to kind of like a central thing about TV shows in this time period, especially when there's so much for people to choose to watch and there's so much competition. If you don't stick the landing, it can crater your whole show. So like for me, it's losing 2 points. Like if they would have landed this thing, it would have been a 9. It'd been one of the highest shows for me. But the way that they kind of just dropped the ball really cratered it. So 7 severed pinkies.
I'm going to come in just a half a point under you guys at a 6.5. And I'd echo a lot of the same things that you guys said about how I was really into this show for its style, its neon noir thing, even just being set in Japan. I loved all those aspects of it, but it didn't hold together at the end. So I'm going to give it 6.5. And I do like the severed pinkies, but I think for me, maybe it's 6.5 empty evidence rooms, because that's what this show felt like. It felt like I was going to get into this room with all of this evidence of this great show, and then you get in and there's just nothing left.
It's fair.
So we got a 7, a 7, and a 6.5. That gives us an average score of 6.83 repeating. So let me check on over to our scoreboard. That's going to put it looks about it looks like right about in the dead center. It's going to be just below Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window, and just above Season 2 of Miracle Workers.
Okay, very nice. They have a chance at redemption, right? If they renew this for a second season and they come in and they could, in fact, even bring Season 1 score up, depending on how they tie a lot of these stories together in the end. But the way that we are, and especially if it gets canceled, not renewed, that was really disappointing at the end.
I mean, I'd watch Season 2.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
So
it had high potential, and it met the potential for most of it.
Yeah, I agree. Are
Shall
we
find
ready?
out? Yeah, let's find out what we're watching next time. Actually, I take that back. We already know what we're watching next time, because next time is Twin Peaks for our 50th episode. So we are going to spin the wheel this time, but it's going to be for our 51st episode. So we'll have a couple of months before that comes out.
That's fair. All right. So we have some time. But on the wheel, and I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but we have Jay's offering, Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. Tell us a little blurb about it.
So Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is a new show that's coming out. I'm taking a leaf out of Tony's book, and I am nominating a show that hasn't even started yet. It's going to start, I think, this coming Thursday. It is a series that will be kind of a prequel to the original Star Trek series. It'll be about the crew of the Enterprise under Captain Christopher Pike, who was the predecessor to James T. Kirk. A lot of the new Trek shows that have been coming out have been not good. So I've got high hopes for this one. We'll see.
Where's your key?
Okay.
That's where it usually is, I think.
Tony?
Mine
Can you take a break?
Winning time. Yeah, I'm gonna submit mine and then run out to get my car. But
Winning Time is about the LA Lakers, right? And it's kind of like a
1980s.
fictional retelling of it.
Yeah, it looks like it's based on a book. Executive producer Adam McKay. I think it's got John C. Reilly in it. That's the 1980s LA Lakers on and off the court. That's my submission. I'll have to catch the surprise ending of the Wheel of Randemonium with our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
I gotta run out real quick.
No problem. The last one is Severance on Apple TV. I know nothing about it. The quick synopsis is that the plot follows Mark, which is Adam Scott, an employee of Lumon Industries, who agrees to a severance program in which his non-work memories are separated from his work memories. Interesting.
I've heard really, really good things about this show. So really, if any of these get picked, I'm excited.
Same here. So here we go. Let us shuffle and spin to win.
We are spinning and spinning, and way Star Trek: Strange New Worlds.
All right. That's on the CBS streaming program?
Yes, Paramount Plus.
It's on Paramount Plus. Okay, we have that. So
yeah, so once you finish up Halo, pop on over. So yeah, it starts May 5th, which I think is coming up just this week, and I think it'll be about probably a 10 episode run or so. So I imagine it's going to finish probably like mid-July. So that'll line up nicely.
Well, we will be focusing on finishing up Twin Peaks because we are in the middle, actually the front half of season 2, and I forgot there's 22 40-minute episodes. So there's quite a trek ahead of me. So I don't know where you're at.
I think I've watched 3 episodes of season 2, and I'm so excited to talk about it.
Already? Oh, okay.
Well, especially because in episode 2, there's some disability frauds, which is kind of my wheelhouse. So I'm
Hey.
really excited to get into that.
Yeah, there's a lot more surreal stuff already happening right in the get-go of season 2. So
yeah. So the theme of the way that things are versus the way that they appear will continue in our next episode.
it's true. All right, so that is it for this episode of the show.
For me, for Tony-san, thank you everybody for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time with Twin Peaks.